Allow me, considering that this is the first press release since the hurricane, allow me to start by extending a sincere word of thanks and gratitude to all of the folks who prior to, during, and after the hurricane have been involved in the emergency relief that took place and is still taking place on the island. The purpose this morning is to expound a bit and to give some facts on the conditions that was imposed or is being imposed on St. Martin by the Dutch government with relation to the recovery aid. One of those conditions, as you know, the two conditions, one has to do with the integrity chamber and the other condition has to do with the border control. As Minister of Justice, the border control falls directly under my responsibility. And you could imagine that I was very much surprised when I learned that one of those conditions had to be with the border control. Surprised because at no time, definitely during the period that I've been in office, that there has been any indication that there were any discontent, any problems or whatsoever with the border control. On the contrary, the belief has always been that the cooperation that presently exists with the Royal Marechaussee and our local police force and other law enforcement agency is one that can be commended. As a matter of fact, is one that has often been used as an example of how we can work together in the interest of law enforcement for our community. So, how to address the condition that was put on the table? This was a question that I had to answer. And I decided, instead of me sitting here telling you how good I believe the cooperation is, etc., but to approach it from a factual point of view, from a factual position, and to refer to exactly things that have been done with border control and the reaction to that, and also primarily by the Dutch government. So if you would bear with me, I would go through the facts of the matter. The condition, and I took the liberty to loosely translate in English, so there may here and there be something not 100%. The position taken by the Dutch government as a condition for border control, which was communicated to the government of St. Martin in a letter dated October the 13th, 2017 by Minister Plasterk, is as follows. The Dutch government deems it necessary that the quality of border control on St. Martin be substantially increased because, in the opinion of the Dutch government, St. Martin is presently not sufficiently able to guard the borders on its own. The opinion is, yes, St. Martin for a while now, a number of years now, has acknowledged that guarding the borders on St. Martin is something that we definitely would have liked to have assistance with, and therefore there is a long-standing cooperation arrangement with the Royal Marechaussee in primarily the guarding of the borders, but I will get back to that. The condition continues to as follows. The threat on the borders has primarily to do with heavy drugs and weapons criminality, migration criminality, the stream of illegal labor migration, and uncontrolled streams of money and goods. Besides that, the resilience at the borders is of great importance in light of the worldwide threat of terrorism. St. Martin also concurs with that and agrees to that, and again, therefore, have made arrangements in order to make sure that these issues at the borders are dealt with. The condition goes on, and here is the condition, that the Dutch government wants to establish a binding mutual agreement whereby it will be agreed upon that the border control on St. Martin will be executed by the Royal Marechaussee and the Dutch Custom under the formal responsibility of the Minister of Justice of St. Martin. And that's where I guess the problem is, because we already are in a binding agreement with not only the Dutch government, but also the government of Curaçao, the government of Aruba. So basically, the 4 countries in the kingdom have a binding agreement in which cooperation and input of the Royal Marechaussee is already taken place. So I guess the difference here is that it is stated that the border control will be executed by the Royal Marechaussee, meaning that they would have the lead and they would do that independently, loose from any other agency, which is not the case at present. The agreements regarding this venture will also include the organizational positioning of the lines of accountability and the monitoring, and will be established for a specific period. Okay. That is the condition as was put on the table. The difference that I see there with what we actually have in place is the fact that, again, that it is stated would be done by the Marechaussee and the Dutch Customs, and no mention is made of any other local law enforcement agency. So what are the arrangements that we have right now with the Marechaussee or with the other governments? And St. Martin presently enjoys a very good working relationship with the Royal Marechaussee. The Royal Marechaussee are more than welcome here on St. Martin, and we appreciate the support they are rendering to our KPSM, which is our police force, in helping keeping our country safe. This cooperation with the Royal Marechaussee is not something that started today. It stems back to the former Netherlands Antilles. Namely, on December the 22nd, 2004, a protocol entitled Gemeenschappelijke Grenscontrole Teams was entered into. Since 2008, 43 FTEs, or 43 full-time positions of the Royal Marechaussees are made available to the Netherlands Antilles and is referred to as a flex pool. After 10-10-10, St. Martin continued this cooperation and signed a protocol with the Dutch government and the Curaçao government on January the 19th, 2010. At the YVO 2010 Curaçao, YVO is the conference held twice a year by the 4 ministers of justices of the kingdom. At that YVO in 2010, St. Martin and the Netherlands indicated their desire to continue this cooperation with the Marechaussee. The duration of the protocol was from January the 1st, 2011 until June the 30th, 2015. The areas of cooperation covered by this protocol was border control, immigration, control of drugs at the borders, combating migration, criminality, combating drugs criminality, combating violent crimes. If you would notice, the same items as mentioned now as reasons for wanting to implement this condition. The protocol also stipulates that the operational responsibility for the use of the flex pool lies with the department head of the department and country where the operation takes place. So in our case, the flex pool would operate under the operational responsibility of our local chief of police. Parties agreed that an evaluation of the functioning of the flex pool on Curaçao and St. Martin would take place in the fourth quarter of 2012. Parties also agreed that decisions regarding any additions or amendments to the protocol by the signatory countries would take place at the YVO meeting. So we have this protocol, we agreed to the terms in the protocol, and we said any one of the parties, at that time, the first protocol, it was only St. Martin and Curaçao, okay? If you want to make any amendments, changes, the YVO is where that would be discussed and decided upon. The evaluation. The evaluation, as stipulated, took place, and an evaluation report, and the evaluation report dates March the 8th, 2013. And this was executed by the Dutch research firm DSP Group, which was contracted by the Minister of BZK, which is Minister Ronald Plasterk himself. The report was presented to the Dutch Second Chamber on June the 14th, 2013. In his presentation letter, Minister Plasterk wrote, among others, in St. Martin, assistance is being provided by the Royal Marechaussees in the areas of general detective work to the KPSM, also with regard to border control. So Minister Plasterk himself indicated that the Marechaussees already at that period are involved on St. Martin in border control. The researchers have also concluded, and this is what, again, in the letter of Minister Plasterk to the Second Chamber, he said, the researchers have also concluded that the use of the flex pool have contributed to the prevented waarborgfunctie based on Article 43 of the statute. The waarborgfunctie is often what is used to make, to threaten if something is not going properly, to impose instruction or something on St. Martin. And here the minister is saying that by having the flex pool operating on St. Martin, that in his opinion, Holland complies with that waarborgfunctie. Continue to say, according to the researchers, the stakeholders experience the Royal Marechaussee as an effective contribution to the maintenance of law and order in the respective countries. Then, in 2015, the annual report of the Ministry, BZK, was presented to the Second Chamber of the Netherlands. This was done on May the 18th when Minister Plasterk presented the annual report. In this report, he states, among others, since 2008, a flexible pool of 43 full-time functions of the Royal Marechaussee, known as CMAR, contributes to the combating of violent crimes, the border and immigration control, the combating of human smuggling and human trafficking, and the combating of drug trafficking via the airports. The officers of the CMAR function under the command of the local department heads and fall under the authority of the respective ministers of justice, which at that time was Curaçao and St. Martin. The costs of the flex pool are for the account of BZK budget. In 2015, it was decided the participation of the flex pool of the Royal Marechaussee for border control will continue until December 31st, 2019. As of July 2015, the support has been extended to include Aruba. With the extension of the protocol, the amount of the support has remained unchanged. These are not my words. These are words of Minister Plasterk to the Second Chamber pertaining to border control, among others, on St. Martin. As was stated, the protocol was extended, the protocol for the flex pool of the Royal Marechaussees. On June the 11th, 2014, the extension of the protocol for the use of the flex pool of the Royal Marechaussee was signed. Aruba has become a party to the protocol. The protocol covers the period July 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2019. We are in 2017. So we have, at present, a valid protocol, a valid agreement with all 4 countries in the kingdom on the participation, pertaining to the participation of the Royal Marechaussees as far as, among others, the border control is concerned. The topics covered are the same that were mentioned: border control, immigration, etc. The extension of the protocol also stipulates that the operational responsibility for the use of the flex pool lies with the department head of the department and country where the operation takes place. So we have a valid agreement among the governments of the kingdom, the different countries of the kingdom, in which that is stated. A valid agreement that is now still valid for at least 2 more years. And this condition goes directly contrary to that valid protocol. We're talking about good governance. It also states, the valid protocol that exists right now states that regarding any additions or amendments to the protocol by the signatory countries, that this would take place at the Justitieel Vierpartijenoverleg at the JVO. The next JVO, the next upcoming JVO, would be in January, I think the 11th or 12th of January, in Curacao. So parties agree, and we said if you want to make any amendments to that, we do it at that conference, at that happening, not via a condition to give recovery aid to St. Martin. Then we continue. BZK, the Ministry of BZK, presented its annual report of 2016 to the Second Chamber. This was done on May the 17th, 2017, a few months ago. Minister Prasek presented his annual report to the Second Chamber. In this report, he states, among others, same as, almost identical as the last report, a flex pool of 43 full-time functions of the Royal Marechaussee contributes to the combating of violent crimes, the border and immigration control, the combating of human smuggling and human trafficking, and the combating of drug trafficking via the airports. The countries indicate annually where they would like the flex pool to be used, whereby the emphasis has to be on border control and immigration control. The officers of the CMAR function under the command of the local department heads and fall under the authority of the respective ministers of justice. This is Mr. Plasterk saying this in May of this year to the Second Chamber of in Holland. Then we have the JVO, that meeting with the 4 ministers. St. Martin's Minister of Justice was host to his colleagues of Aruba, Curacao, and the Netherlands for their twice annual conference. The conference took place on July the 11th, 2017 at the Westin Hotel. July 2017, a month and a half before Hurricane Irma hit us. Agenda point 7 for that conference was the flex pool of the Royal Marechaussee. The Royal Marechaussee were present at that meeting, presented a paper, presented a note in which it was indicated to reprioritize their functioning and to concentrate more on border and immigration, border control. The JVO decision reads as follows. The EVO takes note of the paper presented by the CMAR with regard to the reprioritization of the participation of the CMAR in the flex pool. The EVO concurs with a reprioritization of the participation of the CMAR as is proposed by BZK and in accordance with the decision of the EVO of January the 10th, 2017, and the protocol flexible use of the CMAR for the period January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2019, signed on June 11, 2014. Sufficient attention should be given to the existing participation and tasks of the CMAR in the different countries, and that is for Aruba, training and courses, and for Curacao and St. Martin, high-impact crimes, drugs, criminality, and human trafficking and human smuggling. Point 8 on the agenda was specifically for border control. The issue that was discussed at that point was the exchange of passenger information. Nothing about the involvement of the CMAR, et cetera, et cetera. Like I said, as present, the marechaussees are operating on St. Martin, and that operation, one of the, I can recall when my colleague, Minister Blok of the Netherlands, was here visiting, he insisted, he wanted to visit the airport, because at the airport we have the Alpha team working. And the Alpha team is a combination of the Koninklijke Marechaussees and the local police. And the police recently opened a substation at the airport. And since that Alpha team has been working there, the incidences of forged papers, et cetera, has diminished tremendously. The work that is being done is fantastic. And the reason why Minister Blok wanted to visit was the Alpha team on St. Martin was used as an example of how things, the cooperation could be, and to try to convince Aruba and Curacao to do likewise. So that was a month and a half before the hurricane. As Minister of Justice, I myself was very proud of the cooperation that was being, that we all could see. We travel, we are in the airport, we come in, we leave, with the Koninklijke Marechaussee and the valuable work that they do. Therefore, again, my astonishment when I learned that border control was one of the conditions for St. Martin to be able to receive aid from the Netherlands, because border control is not doing effectively. I would not want to believe that the minister who said that realizes the serious participation, serious work that the Marechaussee is doing in our border control. Could we do more? Yes. And that's why we have the protocol. That's why we agree to reprioritize. And with the reprioritizing, more effort would be made by the Marechaussee on the control of the borders. And the request was, and agreed upon, was that there are a number of Marechaussees, for instance, now on the robbery team with the police. And we said when we are making that shift, because one of the things that the protocol said, we will not increase the amount of Marechaussees. That was not because we said so, that was the Netherlands didn't want to increase the amount. So we asked, we said in making that shift, take into account that you cannot just move away everybody from the robbery team one time, because that will create another gap. The 4 ministers of justices at that meeting, at that EVO, agreed to that. So where the problem is with border control or the involvement of the Marechaussee, that all of a sudden now as a condition, it should be that the Marechaussee take over the border control of St. Martin is a mystery to me. I think it is important that this information, and that's why in this report, I did not use any words of my own. I use the agreements that are signed on the table, which you can have copies of, which you can peruse. I used the public reports that were sent to the second chamber by Minister Plasterk himself. This is what he is telling his second chamber. At no time was there any discussion about non-functioning or what have you not of the border control on St. Martin. I would like to leave it at that point and give the Prime Minister, who got a chance to rest his throat because a serious flu is haunting him. Nevertheless, I don't think he'll be short of words. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Boasman. Thank you, members of the media, for being here. And this is, I believe, our first press briefing since the hurricane. Usually it would be on Wednesdays, but this extraordinary press briefing is being held on Monday today. Preceding the press briefing last night, I sent a press release out, sort of indicating the results of a discussion that we have been having. Not a discussion we've been having, a phone conversation I had with Minister Plasterk. I have not been around for the past, or not for the past, for 9 days. As may be known, I had to accompany my wife, who was scheduled to do surgery on the 6th of September when the hurricane came, and had to go to Puerto Rico, and because of that, it could not go ahead. And then Puerto Rico got damaged, and that couldn't go ahead, and it was rescheduled for Miami. And that is where we were for 9 days, came back on Friday afternoon. So in my absence, there were some developments, and I had advised at the time when I was told that Minister Plasterk wanted to speak to me, I advised that we have a Deputy Prime Minister and the government of St. Martin is still in St. Martin to have the discussion with Minister Boasman. Minister Plasterk insisted nonetheless on calling me while in Miami, and then I understood, because I was not doing any research as such, that he immediately thereafter sent a press release out stating that he had in a phone discussion with the Prime Minister of St. Martin, XYZ. The reason why I insisted that he put it in writing is because for the past months, or past weeks rather, since the hurricane, we have seen a trend where the Dutch government would not officially put certain things in writing, but they would make calls, they would have a conversation, and these things would appear in the media as if it's the official position of the Dutch, but they are not communicating it with you. And that is why my reaction was put it in writing. So that is how we have had the letter from the Dutch government stating that these are their conditions. To that, I reacted on Friday, and that press release went out, accompanying that as well. And then again, I'm home on Sunday, battling the flu, and then I got Minister Boasman, who lives close to me, told a member of the family that he's trying to get in touch with me. And then I got the Secretary General of the Council of Ministers came all the way home to me to say that Minister Plasterk is trying to get in touch with me. The message from Mr. Boasman was the same. So I then checked. There was no message from, there was no phone call from him. But shortly after he called, and we spoke. And the trend of the discussion was again that Minister Plasterk is trying to interpret, give an interpretation to the letter that I can only say to suit his agenda. And the interpretation of it is, and you just saw me on my phone, it's because there was a Dutch reporter who wants to speak to me on the flat-out rejection by St. Martin to the Dutch aid. Now, that is so ridiculous. St. Martin has accepted Dutch aid from the very first day. We have said, yes, we welcome all aid we would get from any and every country, from any and everybody. The situation on St. Martin is one that is almost like unimaginable, the impact the hurricane has had. So for the government of St. Martin to walk around rejecting aid from what would most likely and definitely, let's say, be the biggest donor would be crazy. But what we have seen over the past weeks is an attempt to undermine the credibility of the government of St. Martin. There were news reports about the corrupt government in St. Martin, that the government of St. Martin is willfully withholding aid, relief material that was sent to St. Martin, photos appearing on Facebook and in the national media and things like this. Things that are absolutely not true. Now, in the letter, the Dutch government is finally saying, we won't, the aid comes with conditions. And one would expect those conditions to be how the funds will be made available, what organization need to be in place, what public bidding, this kind of transparency thing that goes with the dispensing of funds or the dispensing of aid. But two issues that have absolutely nothing to do with the conditions after Irma, the conditions of the hurricane, which Minister Boasman so ably, with facts, showed why there is absolutely no reason for the Dutch government to want to take control of immigration and border control. As far as the integrity chamber is concerned, anyone living in St. Martin or following the debate on the integrity chamber would know that we embrace an integrity chamber. We believe that it is something good to have, but we have always, at least I have always been against the manner in which it was done the first time, and based on that, after the ruling of the Constitutional Court, the approach that we used, the approach that I used as Prime Minister was, the Integrity Chamber is a responsibility of St. Martin, and St. Martin will agree to setting up of an Integrity Chamber. This never had the approval of Minister Plasterk, because he felt it is something that the Dutch should do, the Dutch should control, because they need to put an end to corruption in St. Martin. All the reports that were written, if we peruse the reports, it is said, it is alleged, it is suspected, it is rumored, it is said. None of it fact, none of it ever established, none of it ever documented as such, that one can say on April 4th, X amount of drugs were found in the government office. On September 6th, this deal or this arrangement was made between a drug dealer and a minister. None of these things are documented. None of these things are fact. We must realize St. Martin is a country that is 7 years old. The 10th of October, we just celebrated our 7th anniversary as a country. Would we, as a 7-year-old country, make mistakes? Absolutely yes. Would we, as a 7-year-old country, have issues? Would we have integrity breaches? Most naturally. Holland does, the United States does, France, all our countries, you would have integrity breaches. Are we dealing with our integrity breaches? Yes, we are dealing with them, and we have enough cases where there were integrity breaches and the government and the institutions established legally in the country of St. Martin, we have dealt with them. One of the excuses Minister Plaster continues to use is that he had an agreement signed off in 2015 with the government then, and he wants that agreement enforced. Now, part of the agreement was already struck down as well by the Constitutional Court. Besides that, one of the things that Minister Plaster keeps hammering on is that in the agreement they had between him and the government then, there were agreements that he wants back in this agreement. And I'm saying then, and I would say now, and I would say tomorrow. Parliament is the legislative body of St. Martin. Parliament is where laws are established. A minister bilaterally cannot make a law binding for St. Martin. I cannot sign, which was the case in 2015, I cannot sign an agreement with Minister Plasterk saying the Parliament of St. Martin will, because then I am actually doing something in conflict with the Constitution of St. Martin, for which I have taken an oath to uphold and defend that Constitution. I cannot issue an instruction to Parliament, tell them this is legislation and you will have to approve this by the 31st of October. I cannot do that. I cannot sign an agreement with neither the Dutch government, with neither the French government, with no government that results in legislation. I can sign an agreement saying we agree to allow the government to do this. We agree to do that. But once it has to do with legislation, with a law, the only lawmakers are Parliament. I cannot make a law in an agreement with a minister, whether it's Minister Plasterk or whichever minister from whichever country, and say, now this becomes binding on the Parliament of St. Martin. They cannot change it. They cannot vote against it because this is an agreement that I make. Then we may as well suspend Parliament, send them home, and let the Dutch minister sit on the seat of Parliament and make laws for St. Martin. Now, what have we done as far as this integrity chamber is concerned? Everybody knows, thanks. Everybody knows the battle that we've had that resulted in the Constitutional Court striking it down. Since then, what has happened? Minister Plasterk continues to insist that it has to come, and in the manner in which they would want it to come. They took the case to the Kingdom Council of Ministers. In there, I went to Holland, I traveled to Holland to defend St. Martin's position. Everybody knows in the Kingdom Council of Ministers, there are some 12 Dutch ministers, and there is 3 minister plenipotentiary from Aruba, from Curacao, from St. Martin. Regardless to your position, the so-called democratic deficit, they have 12 votes against 3 votes. So even if the countries in the Caribbean, Curacao, Aruba, St. Martin, vote one way, the Kingdom Council of Ministers would always overrule. So Minister Plaster got his wish to give St. Martin an instruction. That has to go to the Council of Advice, the Council of State, the Raad van State, for an advice. I used the protocol that was signed in 2015, and in that protocol there's a provision that if there is a dispute between the 2 parties, they have to, the dispute got to be settled by the Council of State. So I used that, and we had a hearing on July 6th in the Netherlands. In that hearing, the Council of State basically ruled several things. One, There will be, well, in the discussions, it was agreed upon, there will be no quartermaster, because you can recall Holland had said they have finally now decided to appoint a quartermaster. While it was agreed upon in the protocol, they would appoint a quartermaster no later than July 1st, 2015. They never appointed a quartermaster in 2015. They decided to appoint one in 2017. So the Council of State stated there will be no quartermaster, not on the part of St. Martin, not on the part of Holland. There will be no political consultations. Civil servants at a high level would have consultations, and they have to take into account the ruling of the Constitutional Court, and the St. Martin government will promote that the draft will be in Parliament and established no later than October 31st, 2017. You can't instruct the Parliament to do it because Parliament is its own body, has its own responsibilities. Consultations did take place. Consultations did take place. It did not say that parties had to reach an agreement on a particular text. Consultations had to take place, which happened. Consultations took place. The draft was presented to the Council of Ministers, and it was in July, the end of August. It was in the Council of Ministers, and August 31st, it was in the Council of Ministers, and it was approved and immediately sent to the Governor of St. Martin to pass on to the Council of Advice. That was done on the 3rd of September 2017. On the 6th of September, well, the 5th, we already had shut down shop in St. Martin. Everywhere was closed, government, and on the 6th, the hurricane came. Lo and behold, so we on track to establish the integrity chamber. Lo and behold, just like with the case with justice, there is an agreement because we went with our dispute to the Council of State. The Council of State gave a ruling, and St. Martin is abiding by that ruling, and out of left field comes the argument by Minister Plasterk that the integrity chamber has to be accepted the way he wants it, and if it is not accepted, there will be no money, there will be no aid from the Netherlands. Now, if that is not blackmailing the government of St. Martin and holding the people of St. Martin hostage and forcing the people of St. Martin to rebel against their government, because this is what the ultimate goal is. Tell the people there's a bag of money waiting to come your way from The Hague and everywhere else, but it is that gang in St. Martin that is preventing it from happening. So force the people of St. Martin to basically take to the streets to overthrow their government because the government does not agree with something that is already in motion. There are those who would say, oh, the egos and the personal battles. There is no ego on the part of William Marlin in this. I mean, I would be crazy to actually block aid from coming to the people of St. Martin, people who are losing their jobs, people who are homeless, people who are roofless. I would be crazy to even dare walk in the community where I am preventing aid to come to them. But one of the things that I said recently at Constitution Day, when we had the service at the Catholic Church, I said is that we, all of us, ministers and members of Parliament, we have all taken an oath to uphold and defend our Constitution. I don't want to get in no international war But we could see as well that a president of what one considers the most powerful country in the world signed an executive order to have certain things done. It was challenged in court, and the court said, no, Mr. President, it is illegal. You cannot do it. It's against the Constitution. The Constitution is what we have to abide to, is what we have to respect, is what we have, and we have taken an oath to defend. Any one of us who act in contravention with the Constitution, we are acting illegally, we are acting unlawfully. Now, what is the issue? So one would say, so what's the big deal? You got something to hide? No, William Marlin has nothing to hide. William Marlin was screened 4 or 5 times to become minister, and he has passed the screening each time. I don't have anything to hide. I'm not afraid of an integrity chamber because I'm afraid to go to prison because of something that I have done. Absolutely not. And I'm not defending anybody in my party or anybody in government because all the ministers had to go through a screening. And our system sifts out, and if you fail the screening for whatever the reason may be, you cannot become a minister. So we are not protecting any politician. Where the contention is, and I want people to understand well, that it may look like, oh, it's frivolous, it's no big deal, so why they don't give in so we can get money? No, it is not about just give in to get money. It is about following the correct process in handling with each other, and it is not right because the country is hit by what we consider a Category 7 hurricane, that you're now going to use that to bring them down to their knees. What is the big issue with the Integrity Chamber? We agree on basically everything. Where's the contention? Holland insists that they appoint with a binding nomination, they appoint the chairman and the kingdom government. Well, between the kingdom government and the Dutch government, they appoint 2 people, and St. Martin appoints 1. In the draft that St. Martin has made, we are saying we will make the Integrity Chamber one of our high councils of state. Which is our high council of state? The Council of Advice, the Ombudsman, the Parliament, the Audit Chamber. They're our high councils of state at that level. To do that, we need to change our constitution, and there's no big deal there because the coalition has a 10-member majority in Parliament. But even if we don't have, why would we not want our Integrity Chamber to be one of our high councils of state? Now, who will appoint the members on the Integrity Chamber? Because the Dutch are saying, oh, we don't trust the politicians, okay? We don't trust the politicians. Basically, then you're also saying Holland doesn't trust the people of St. Martin, because the politicians are not self-appointed. The politicians are elected by the people of St. Martin. So if you don't trust the politicians, you're not trusting the judgment of the people of St. Martin. But what we have done, we have said, no, the politicians won't appoint anybody, because if you appoint, then it would be told, oh, you appoint Peter, you appoint Paul or Mary because they're your friends or they're your cronies. In our legislation, we have one person. Binding nomination will be put forward by the Court of First Instance of St. Martin, Curaçao, Aruba, Sabre Station, Bonaire. So one person put forward by the court. Another person put forward by our audit chamber. A third person put forward by our ombudsman. all of them carry out investigations. The court, the audit chamber, and the council and the ombudsman. As I said, we are a young country. We have to build our country. We have to build our institutions. We have to have confidence in ourselves and in our people. If our premise is going to be that when we do things, we are doing it on the basis of we don't trust ourselves, we don't trust our own people, we don't trust our own institutions, then what country are we saying we want to be? That is where the whole thing comes in. Now, the roles are being reversed, and the headlines are, the government of St. Martin is not cooperating and is blocking aid to come to the people of St. Martin. While the headlines should be, the Dutch government, through Minister Plasterk, is holding the St. Martin people hostage because he wants to insist on controlling an integrity chamber in St. Martin. And again, we have nothing to hide. The people who were caught in integrity breaches on St. Martin, I don't need to go down the list. One of our local newspapers did a brilliant job in pointing that out as well. There are a number of people who have been prosecuted, who have lost their jobs, who government has fired because of their involvement in wrongdoing. We have candidates who are put forward for screening who do not pass the screening. It does not necessarily mean that they had a criminal record, but the findings of the investigation that is carried out to determine whether a person is eligible to be a minister or not. We have the same thing with some of the positions. If you want to hold key positions in our government companies, if you want to hold key positions in government, you're subject to a screening. And if found at the result of that screening that it points out that that person should not fill that position, it is done. So to come now at this time of the day when the people are crying out for aid, and when you use it, you misuse it to actually tell the government of St. Martin, if you do not agree with my conditions, there will be no aid. In my discussion with Minister Plasterk yesterday over the phone, I said, Minister, we have made our position clear in writing. One of the things that you have not mentioned up till today, what amount of aid can St. Martin rely on? How will that division be? Will we have 80% of it will be grant and 20% loan? Will X amount of millions be loaned? X amount? He said, absolutely not. There will be no discussion about an amount, and there will be no fund if St. Martin does not agree with my conditions. So I said, well, that is not having a discussion. The discussion is not about an integrity chamber. The discussion is about aid to St. Martin following the hurricane. Yes, but his conditions as signed off on in 2015 for the integrity chamber have to be carried out, or else it won't be accepted, because I said we are nearing the completion of the integrity chamber. No, because he does not trust the institutions on St. Martin. Now I'm saying this is so wrong. This is so wrong. And then that our people would then call for the resignation of the government and for a motion of no confidence in the government because they are holding the St. Martin people hostage. I am saying no. We need to, as a people, take stock and see what is being done to us as a people, rather than blindly only looking at there's a bag of money. I want to close with using an analogy from the movie Indecent Proposal. Those of you who looked at that movie or heard about it, and where a young couple went to a casino and lost everything. And when they were there in their desperation, up come this millionaire guy and said, I realized you lost all of your money and you came to the casino actually to win. But I can help you. I can give you $1 million. And the couple look at each other. And the millionaire guy says, but there's a condition. Those of you who saw the movie know what the condition was. Those of you who did not see the movie, Google it, look it up, and you will find out what the indecent proposal was. But like I said in church on Constitution Day, and I asked the members of the clergy, because several churches on St. Martin were severely damaged by the hurricane, some more than the others. But any church that was damaged by a hurricane and any benefactor came forward and say, hey, I am willing, just like the Dutch now is doing, I'm willing to provide aid. Would you accept $100,000? Absolutely yes. Why not? But then there are conditions. And if the condition is that once you accept the aid, the one who gives the money decides who will preach in that church, on what day there will be service in that church, and from what time to which time, and the content of what will be preached in that church from henceforth. And when I look, there was not one pastor who would want to accept aid under those conditions. Then I asked the congregation, the people who were there, if your house was damaged by hurricane and somebody came forward and say, I have $100,000 to help you put back on your roof, would you accept? And I'm sure any one of you in here today, now, and those who are listening, if you were asked to accept aid for $100,000 to help put back on your roof, regardless to who you were or who you are, I'm sure you would say, of course. But then comes the condition. I will provide aid only if I decide which room you can sleep in, who can be in the room when you're in that room, who can visit, when they can visit, and if your family and friends are allowed to visit. And then the question would be, would you accept aid under those conditions? And that is the situation that St. Martin is being forced into. Can William Marlin and Rafael Boasman and the rest of the Council of Ministers write a check to provide the aid? No. No, they can't. But should we, because we are the government, accept aid for the people of St. Martin under any and all conditions? And again, let me stress here, while it may look like frivolous conditions, while it may look like, what's the big deal? Give it to them. Give it to them. Because then I can also then turn and tell, for instance, a church, what's the big deal? You already have your faith and your belief, so let whoever want to preach, let them preach. And so what you prefer? You prefer not to have a roof over your head or the guy put on the roof? All he is telling you is you can't sleep in that room, you got to sleep in this one, or your aunt can't visit. So then you go by your aunt. But we would not accept those conditions. So it is not that St. Martin is rejecting aid. St. Martin is saying, aid, yes. Aid, absolutely yes. But Holland, please revisit your conditions. I thank you.
Now open the floor for questions that the media might have, observing the following guidelines. 3 rounds, 1 question per media member, starting at the left end of the table. Mr. Hilbert Hart, Today newspaper. Good afternoon. Microphone is on.
Yeah.
Hilbert,
Okay.
you have the floor. Go right ahead, please.
Okay, thank you, Prime Minister. I'm surprised that we're talking about conditions at all, given that Professor Goutappel pointed out in Trouw last week to Article 36 of the Kingdom Charter that says that the countries assist each other, period. There's no mention of conditions at all there.
No, I agree, and I'm saying there should be the only conditions that should be discussed are how will the money be spent. For us to give you money to jumpstart your economy, this got to be in place. And the same thing I've said. In 1995, we had a reconstruction coordinator that was based in St. Martin. I was Minister of Housing back in those days. If I would use the example of the emergency homes, there were conditions for the dispensing of the 3.8 million guilders for that project. We met the conditions. The monies were dispensed. No check was written to the government of St. Martin. No money was deposited. The contractors were paid. We even, in our discussions or in our attempt to have a discussion with Holland, we have said Holland can make its, we will allow the Dutch audit chamber to audit any institution that receives aid. Any money spent, because you got to give account to your parliament how the money was spent. Let the audit chamber audit that paper trail, audit the money trail, and if something went wrong, deal with it. We have never, from the very beginning, you see headlines, Holland won't just deposit money, Holland won't just send no check. And I, in one of my discussions with their coordinator, who they have here now, I said, why is Holland behaving this way? Why are you guys behaving like Don Quixote? You build your own windmills, and then you start a public fight with them as if we are setting these conditions or these demands. Clearly, in our letter, when we sent it with the National Recovery Plan, the preliminary draft that was made, we sent it outlining this will be our budget shortfall in 2017, in 2018, and 2019. We would want assistance here and the process to be followed for us to structure the understanding, the agreement, and whatnot. Rather than discussing the aid, the discussion is being carried out, or no discussion actually, demands before we release $1, before we even establish the fund. If you don't agree to these two conditions, there will be no fund and therefore no money.
Thank you very much, Hilbert.
Okay.
One question, move on. You get your next question in the next round. Mr. Wilson, 98.1 Pearl FM, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Prime Minister. I can recall back in '95 for the production of these homes, you all spent a good amount of money. Do you all have the molds for those if you have the land to reproduce those emergency homes again?
No, that project was the following. It had to be a bid, and it had to be open to international contractors as well. What I secured for the St. Martin people or the St. Martin contractors was that no company that is not locally registered can bid on their own. So if you have a construction company, let's say Windward Roads on St. Martin, Windward Roads can bid on their own. If you have Baton Bow, they can bid on their own. In this case, a Venezuelan company bid, but they had to bid in partnership with a local company. So you could not, as an outside company, bid without a partnership with a local company. The local company at the time was Kazam. I can't remember the name of the Venezuelan contractor, but why the houses were as cheap as they were in terms of cost is because they were fabricated in Venezuela, where the aggregates, the cement, the steel was way cheaper than in St. Martin. The cost of labor was way cheaper. The highest component in the pricing of the house was the shipment on a barge, because they came in two halves. And then the local work was the assembling, preparing the platform, the sewage, hooking up to the electrical grid, and when you put the two houses together, to join them where they had to be joined. I'm happy, probably proud to say there was basically zero damage to those homes, and they're here since 1997, I believe, 96, 97. So basically 20 years and zero damage to those homes. We are in discussion with companies to build, and our concept for after the hurricane, it's build back better. So yes, we want to build back in concrete as much as possible, but the only problem that we have is, which is a problem we had then as well, the availability of land. For us to build back or build 600, 3,000 homes, if you build them that way, you won't have enough land. So we are looking at the same way we've done at Hope Estate, build high-rise so we can build as much as possible. We're in discussions also with people, property owners, people who own land, to enter into public-private partnerships, which is what we've done back then too. Most of those homes are built on leased land. So we will go into what is now known as the shanty towns, that we will go into. We have already been there, have had discussions with property owners, and also areas where the property owner did not build as yet, but to enter into public-private partnerships and realize homes. That's the only way we can eradicate the poor housing situations that we have. And as part of those discussions, we are looking at building a number of homes for our pensioners, our seniors, which will be affordable, and we are looking at rent at no more actually than 100 guilders per unit.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson, for
Per
your
month.
question. Judy Fitzpatrick, the Daily Herald. You have the floor.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My question, Prime Minister Marlin. We seem to be at a stalemate with the Dutch government. If it turns out that it doesn't work out, what is St. Martin's plan B? And what is your next step?
There is a plan B, but of course we won't have a public discussion of plan B right now. We don't think a plan B would be necessary. We believe that reason has to prevail in Holland. We can't imagine that the Dutch government will continue to insist that if they do not get control of an integrity chamber, that they won't release any aid to St. Martin. I cannot imagine Holland telling the international community that no, because if there's a bundle of crooks in government, then lock them up. Then prosecute them and lock them up. If there's anything on any member of this government, including William Marlin, prosecute them and lock them up.
Thank you very much, Judy. Hilbert?
Minister Boasman, in the letter Minister Plastek wrote about the deployment of the marechaussee, it says that this would fall under the formal responsibility of our Minister of Justice, of you. Does that little word formal give you a level of comfort, or do you think that it doesn't mean anything?
First of all, the Constitution says that it falls under the responsibility of the Minister of Justice of St. Martin, and there's no word formal or whatever there. And as the Prime Minister said, we took an oath and vowed to uphold the Constitution. So it is not up to Minister Plasterk to say under whose responsibility it's going to fall, because the Constitution already says under whose responsibility it falls. So I think adding that word formal is already an indication as to how we are dealing, but that is not even important. It's not about me or who's in charge or what have you not. It's about our Constitution stipulates how the situation is and where the responsibilities lie. And unfortunately, a hurricane hit St. Martin, okay? And we are now abusing basically that situation to achieve something that we will not be able to achieve other than changing the Constitution. That's the sad part about it. That's the thing part about it. So I'm more concerned also about the operational part. You know, when we are having these discussions, we gotta. I have to bear in mind that the officers of the marechaussee are also listening to this briefing, and I want to make clear that this has absolutely nothing to do with the performance or the people of the marechaussee who are operating on this island. Because when I say that we do appreciate what they are doing, and would want definitely to continue the assistance with them, I mean it. So this has nothing to do with that level. I have heard over and over from our local chief of police, Mr. Carl John, how good the cooperation is with the marechaussee, which cannot always be said for other agencies operating. But it's unfortunate that just the one that is functioning, the one that is often used as an example, is where this comes down on. That's really, really unfortunate.
Thank you very much, Hilbert. Mr. Wilson?
Okay, His Justice, Mr. Boasman. When it comes to the issue of what Holland is actually putting forward, that if you don't make adjustments, you don't get the money. But at what stage is the analytic issues with you when it comes to there are so many people that has been laid off, and whether some would ask to go home and come back when it's you know, a feasible time in order for them to come back and work because of the shutdown of so many businesses.
Okay, you're drawing that together with a condition set by Holland?
Yes.
Okay. It's hard for me to say, because immigration and immigration policy is something that belongs to the local government. We have a situation on the island now where there are a lot of migrant workers working on St. Martin. Not so long ago, I made a release in which it was stipulated, a couple of things were mentioned. We didn't change the law. The law remains the same. We didn't put in any new regulations. It is and will continue to be, if you are residing illegal on the island and you're found to be doing that you will be repatriated. That has been so before the hurricane, that would remain so after the hurricane. You have to separate a couple of things. In the immediate emergency phase, right after the hurricane, no government is going to look at who has papers and who don't have papers when it comes to providing the immediate aid after such a disaster that we have had. So who needed medical aid, shelter, what have you not. There was nobody standing at the door asking if you have papers or you don't have papers. It would be very inhumane to do so. So we did not do that. As you are recovering, all right, you would find situations where people would have a situation that they are here on the island, They have been employed by maybe one of the major hotels that have been destroyed. Okay, that would take a year and a half before they can reopen. In some of those cases, maybe those folks even have lost their homes that they were living in, or cannot afford a new home to move to. We are looking at the possibilities first of voluntary migration, okay, where people finding themselves in a situation like that who may find that it is better for them to leave and voluntarily go back to their country of origin. We also expect, and this doesn't necessarily have to do with migrants, but we also expect from a justice point of view that with the projected possible increase in unemployment, et cetera, there are other social problems, among others, and maybe an increase in crime, which can come about. Reasons why also, because we are talking about the marechaussee is one way, but we also have 50 or odd police officers from the National Police in Holland right now working with us. Therefore, we have also requested for them to be able to stay longer. Security is a very important issue. The people have to feel safe. Businesses have to feel safe that they can reopen to get the economy going again. And again, there, if you would notice the cooperation that we have had, not only with Holland, but with also Aruba and Curacao, since the hurricane, that has allowed us to even bounce back quicker and keep things safe. So the immigration issue we will be looking at, what we did, we extended the period for those folks who would have submitted a renewal, an extension to their permits in the month of September, but the office was closed, so that could not have been dealt with. And in reviewing those applications, naturally, it would be taken into account if the employer who submitted such a request, and especially in cases of a first-time request, if the employer who submitted that request, example, a hotel that has been damaged and is now presently closed, who had prior to the hurricane requested 5 roommates, let's put it that way, as a first-time request. First of all, the law states that you should await your approval outside. So it is easy to assume that those folks are not here. If that particular hotel has now put their workers on a reduced work week because they don't have work for them for that, why would you allow 5 more to come in now? That was prior to the hurricane, the situation. So those things are being done, and that is how the exercise is going to take place. So the immigration issue is being dealt with, but it has absolutely nothing, trust me, with the condition of that is not the immigration that is referred to. All right? It cannot be the condition of immigration that is referred to. It would be difficult for me to believe that the people of St. Martin would believe that after the majority of our workers, for instance, have been put on reduced work week and a lot losing their job, that you would have a government that would be opening the door for a flood of people to come in. It just doesn't make sense. So that is not an excuse, and I don't think we should put the two together.
Thank you.
One of the things, if I may butt in there, that was part of the discussion yesterday, Minister Plasterk, when we touched on the border, I said there is absolutely no reason, and it's outlined in our letter, and that is what I would want to stick to. He said, yes, but Holland has concerns because now with the influx of the amount of money and with the open borders that St. Martin have, we expect criminals are going to be coming to St. Martin. So my thing was, so what are you telling me? Holland is going to be sending money in bags by couriers, and then those couriers will be held up at gunpoint. No. But where there's a lot of money, you'll have integrity breaches. You'll have a rise in criminality. I said, but it didn't happen in 1995. It didn't happen before. We are getting money from the European Union for projects. We are getting. So why is it that because a hurricane hits St. Martin, now criminals are going to head here because the Dutch government is going to be sending money for projects? Is it cash money they're sending? No. So the discussions, the argumentations brought forward, as far as I'm concerned, as far as the government is concerned, on the part of the Dutch government are frivolous, and they actually hold no ground.
Thank you, Pearl. Judy?
Thank you. Prime Minister, I would appreciate it if you can answer the part of my first question I asked, what is the next step? And you didn't indicate
I did
that.
answer it.
Yeah, okay. And my question now is, you said that Minister Plasterk has not indicated how much funds, financial.
He said he will not disclose an amount
correct.
until we decide to agree.
My question is, if St. Martin were to put a figure as to what sort of aid we would like to receive, how much would it be, and what specific areas would it be used for? So
It is
if we
all
asked-
mentioned in the draft National Recovery Plan. It will be released, I believe, this afternoon. So you'll get all that information this
Okay.
afternoon.
Can you just indicate what the amount
Thank you,
is?
Judy.
You'll get this afternoon.
Hilbert?
Yeah, one last question, Prime Minister. Do you think Minister Plasterk is bluffing? Because personally, I think that the Netherlands cannot, in the international community, say, hey, we got a problem there, but we're not going to give them any money.
Like I just said earlier, well, let me put it this way. I cannot believe that the incoming government, that's one of the things that he says also, don't worry, in Holland, government has continuity, and this government has taken this position, and that will be the position of the new government as well. I cannot imagine that any government is going to stick to guns, that if you don't give up, if you don't allow us access to something that we have no right to, if you don't give us access to it, there will be no aid. I cannot imagine that.
Thank you very much, Hilbert. Mr. Wilson?
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Prime Minister, Minister of General Affairs, and also Minister of Justice. Going forward, we know we have to continue to build St. Martin. We don't have to be looking and waiting for no one else to do it for us. We have always been doing it ourselves. What about the University of St. Martin? I've been hearing some issues there about it. What's your take on whether we will be moving on and
The issues
Yeah.
pertaining to the university, as I've said, I was away for 9 days and just got back over the weekend. The Minister of Education is deeply involved with it, and I would not want to give any kind of comment now on it. I do not have sufficient information. So that question, you don't need a press briefing necessarily to put it to the minister. I'm sure you can ask the minister and you will get a response on that.
Thank you very much, Pearl. Judy?
A question from my managing editor. He says the Dutch has set October 31st deadline for St. Martin to pass the national law to implement an integrity chamber with Dutch conditions included. Otherwise, they will move to impose it themselves under Article 51. Is it your understanding that Plasterk has now shifted that goalpost, and if St. Martin doesn't play along, the Dutch aren't even considering Article 51 anymore, and their aid offer is completely off the table as a result? Is that your understanding?
How, I gave an outline just now. How did we get where we got? The dispute, they already took a decision to use Article 51 and give St. Martin an instruction. Because the Integrity Chamber is part of a protocol that was signed in 2015, we use that protocol to appeal to the Council of Advice, Council of State. Based on that, the Dutch had to put on hold the handling of the instruction based on Article 51. There is an agreement which we are carrying out. Now, for Holland to put aside the agreement and then go back to the Council of State and say, we want to enforce Article 51, the only difference that you have there is that, and this is how they've been operating, when they use the Council of State renders an advice, the Dutch government would say, it's an advice, but I don't agree with the advice. So if that's the route they would need to go, or they would want to go, I don't know, that is for their account, but that does not make it right. The fact that you circumvent the rules does not make it right. And that is what my fight and my beef has been. And if people of St. Martin are going to say, oh, Prime Minister, stop fighting, just give them what they want, then it's like opening your yard, opening your house, and say, let anybody walk in, do what they want, how they want, when they want, because your roof on anyhow and you can't put it on.